You're watching Heavy Metal, here on the History Channel.
December 1950, Soviet-built MiG-15s fly into action for the very first time.
The MiG-15 had an enormous impact when it appeared in the skies above Korea. First, it was a psychological blow to the Americans, who were shocked, frankly, at being technically outclassed by this new war machine. And secondly, it had a very severe physical impact. It was a cut above the propeller-driven aircraft which the Americans were using at the time, and it shot down an awful lot of fighters, and particularly bombers.
The Russian fighters operated secretly from safe bases around Antung, north of the Yalu River in China. The area between the Yalu River on the Chinese border and central North Korea became known as MiG Alley. Western aircraft entered at their peril. In addition to supplying the Chinese with MiGs, the Russians were also secretly training Chinese and North Korean pilots.
I was one of the 80 chosen to go to the Manchuria and trained first by the North Koreans to fly the propeller planes. After that, we turned over to the Soviet Air Force to learn to fly the jet planes. All we learned was just take off and landing. That's about it. And then they told us that we are now ready for the solo in the MiG-15. So everybody had some problems because of the tremendous thrust and also high altitude capabilities.
Если взять корейцев, с феодального века в реактивный.
The Koreans, they had to leap from the feudal age into the jet age. Can you imagine what a gap?
Ничего не видели, ничего не знали. И их сразу в реактивные.
They didn't know anything, and they were put into these jet planes. This wasn't easy to do.
Очень много словесно приходилось.
There was a lot of talking and persuading, and we had to convince them of how things had to be done.
Убеждать, что нужно так делать, так и так.
Целый день понадобилось только узнать, как кого зовут, записать.
I needed a whole day to get to know their names and to get to know them. I didn't speak any Chinese, and those I had to teach didn't know any Russian. The pilots taught them to fly, and we taught them how to service and maintain the plane.
But the MiG's brief air supremacy was about to be challenged. Within weeks, a squadron of the new American F86 Sabres was rushed from the United States to take the MiGs head-on.
You were afraid of them a little bit. And of course, with our F86s, we knew it was a fine airplane, and we knew it had all kinds of combat capability, but until you actually engaged the enemy aircraft and actually found out you against the other fella how it performed, then it didn't give you a lot of confidence.
When the MiGs first engaged in head-to-head combat against the Sabres, they finally met their match. A new era in aerial combat was about to begin, the jet versus jet dogfight.
We were patrolling on this patrol line when we spotted these 4 airplanes coming toward us at a very impressive high rate of speed. My first impression then of the MiG was that I was up against something that was really a dynamo. So I started maneuvering into position to keep hitting him to see if I couldn't get the airplane to blow. And I used almost my entire load of ammunition on him before he finally looked like he was out of control and went on into the ground.
The MiG pilots realized they no longer had supremacy of the skies. Early dogfights meant that new tactics had to be learned fast.
This aerial combat was basically chaotic both vertically and horizontally. But from the battle we learned we should never fight sabres horizontally.
MiG had a better than a 2,500 foot per minute rate of climb advantage. could turn tighter, could out-accelerate, could out-decelerate, and were roughly the same speed. We talk about the 86 being faster and the MiG being faster. It depends on what altitude you're at. Now, we're not talking about a large or an excessive difference. We're talking maybe 3, 4, 5 miles an hour.
The Sabre was a good plane, but its engine seemed to be weaker, because my MiG could climb up and escape from him, but he could not escape from me. I would always catch up with him. Our MiG was very well armed, much better than the Sabre. We had 3 machine guns, and the caliber of the guns was such that one hit could destroy a Sabre.
We just had 50 caliber. We could hit the MiG a number of times, and the MiG wouldn't necessarily go down. But if the MiG hit an F86 a few times with those cannons, the F86 was not going to make it home.
Мы дрались с ними, так честно говоря, в спортивном азарте.
We fought against them like sportsmen. Whoever handled their plane best won.
И побеждает.
If you are weak, bad luck.
То не берись.
Когда вот он на какое-то мгновение может в воздушном бою и там, который...
You look for a moment of hesitation in an air battle, which lasts for say 20 minutes. You may only get 2 or 3 seconds, and once you notice him hesitating, that's when you press the trigger and hit the target.
The main role of the MiG-15 was to intercept American bombers raiding North Korea with their Sabre escorts. The principal MiG tactic was to take advantage of its superior altitude and lie in wait at heights up to 50,000 feet and then ambush the American air armadas below.
If possible, go up to 50,000 feet. 50,000 feet, then American plane wouldn't come up there. You go up to 50,000 feet and look down at the American plane and go down and shoot.
In October 1951, Lev Ivanov led a Soviet MiG attack on 48 B-29 bombers.
Шли они без прикрытия со стороны моря и шли градусов под...
They came flying in from the sea without cover at an angle of 30 degrees towards the bridge, which was the best approach to bomb it.
Пришли с опозданием прикрытия.
The Sabres came in to protect the bombers, but they were 4 minutes late, so naturally we took advantage of that.
Всем воспользовались, конечно. Как только увидел...
As soon as I saw a Sabre, I got onto its tail, aimed, fired, and that was that.
So many bombers were lost that this day became known as Black Tuesday. The MiGs had outmaneuvered, outflown, and outgunned their opponents. With precious few Sabres available to stand up to the MiGs, it looked as though the challenge of the Sabre was overrated. But for the Russians, the price of keeping their activities secret would play a major role in the battle for the skies over Korea.
You're watching Heavy Metal, here on the History Channel.
The Russian MiGs that roamed the skies above Korea had astonished the West. Now total victory for either side looked unlikely. The Korean War would be a limited war, for the West to contain communism, and for the communists to avoid the humiliation of defeat. The Soviet MiG-15s enjoyed many advantages. They were flown out of bases across the border in China, which were out of bounds to the American air crews. So after combat in MiG Alley, the MiGs had a safe haven to return to. Although the MiGs were flying in Chinese colors, it was an open secret that many of the pilots were actually highly experienced Russian aces from World War II. But Russian pilots were walking a deadly fine line. Neither side could admit that US and Soviet jet pilots were facing each other in open combat for fear